In no other industry is the human factor more relevant than it is in the hospitality business. The reason I say this is because in hotels, our decisions, our actions, our interactions are all on stage, they are being watched, they are being judged, and they are forming an impression. Everything that we do ultimately translates into a guest experience. After all, this business of hotels is about savoir-faire and savoir-être. So what is the human factor? We need to ask 3 questions and answer these 3 questions. What is the human factor? Why is it important? And what can we do to improve upon it? I'm going to take the second question first. The human factor in hotels is important because, ladies and gentlemen, it's the nature of the business. This is a people's business. You can have the finest hotels, you can have the most beautiful buildings, the largest rooms, the most comfortable beds, a choice of pillows, a fabulous bathroom and fittings, luxury designer toiletries. But your hotel cannot be classified a great hotel unless you have a very strong human factor, unless the team is exceptionally strong. When everything else can be copied, right? In fact, if you look at chain hotels, they do copy and paste. Several of their hotels look exactly alike. Let's take restaurants, for example. You have a theme restaurant that may be there in several properties of a chain hotel. Same decor, same linen, same crockery, cutlery, same menu to a great extent, and yet guest experience is that one restaurant is better than the other. What makes the difference? It's the human factor. Net, the point is that you cannot have a great hotel unless you have a great staff, unless you have highly motivated and enthusiastic staff members. If you do not have staff engagement, you cannot have a great hotel. And that is why the human factor is so important in the hotel business. So what is the human factor? Is it about people interaction? Yes, it is. Sometimes there's direct interaction. Like, for example, a receptionist when she's welcoming a guest. Sometimes there is indirect interaction, like in housekeeping, where a chambermaid may never see the guest, and yet that chambermaid knows where to do the turn-down service, which side, because that's the side that the guest uses the bed. That chambermaid knows how to place the telephone by the bedside table because the guest likes it at an angle. That is human interaction, but it's indirect. Human interaction between customer and service provider, human interaction between service provider and service provider, human interaction between customer and customer. It's very important when a client goes to a hotel, he wants the entire experience. So when he's told that in this hotel, children below 12 years of age are not expected to be there, he expects a certain class in that hotel. He expects to interact with people that are like-minded. So human-to-human interaction, customer-to-customer interaction is as important for the guest experience, right? But it's not only about the customer. The interaction is also greatly within colleagues, because you can have excellent interaction between a service provider or a staff member and a client, but what about back of the house or heart of the house? What about those people, right? Is it about leadership? Most definitely, the human factor is about leadership. And what is leadership? I mean, we've been in this business for so long. What is leadership? How do you define leadership? Leadership, or good leadership, is nothing but the ability to consistently take good decisions and to implement those decisions effectively. Consistently, good decisions and implementation. That is good leadership, nothing else. And good leadership determines the kind of staff you have. Good leadership determines your staff motivation levels. And leadership, ladies and gentlemen, is not only about senior management. Leadership could be a supervisor. Leadership could be an experienced colleague who has taken it upon himself to help others. So yes, the human factor is about leadership. Decision making. Every day in the hotel business, we're taking decisions every hour, every minute. Decisions that are impacting either our employees or decisions that are impacting our customers. What is the basis for good decisions? And how often do we come across impediments to good decisions? Good decisions are taken from intelligence. Good decisions are taken from data, from knowledge. Good decisions are taken when you get other people's views. Good decisions are very rarely taken from the ego. And yet we find a lot of people take decisions out of ego. And that is detrimental to the human factor, because decisions from ego are not normally good decisions, right? Process mapping. This is a very important factor in hotels. Standard operating procedures. We talk about everything has to be standardized, and standard operating procedures are very important, very critical, because it limits the areas of error. But when you and many of you are probably quite involved in determining standard operating procedures, but do your standard operating procedures put in a lot of controls, or do your standard operating procedures put in a lot of empowerment? Because without empowerment, your standard operating procedure will not be very efficient, right? And at the same time, when you give empowerment, you've got to make sure that the person who is being empowered has the ability to take good decisions. There's no point empowering people if they don't have the capability. I've come across some people who are very good at delegating. They do an excellent job of delegating, get somebody else to do the job, right? But a problem that they face is they sometimes don't delegate to the right person. Yeah? The human factor in any organization is also determined by the values and the culture of that organization. Now, I've read a lot of values of companies, and invariably, those values are around quality, customer service, respect, profitability, productivity, CSR, employees, etc. But some of the descriptions of those values are so vague, are so difficult, that how does the, your staff at the ground level understand what he's supposed to do? And what is the culture of an organization? The culture of an organization is nothing but how the values of that organization are lived. And who determines that? It comes from leadership, right? You have a leader who says, my main aim is to improve my employees. My main aim is to develop my employees. That's the culture of the organization. Comes along another leader, he says, my main aim is profitability. I'm going to make my employees work. It doesn't matter. My main aim is profitability. That becomes the culture of the organization. The human factor relies so much on leadership, on values, and the culture that a leader creates in his organization. Finally, how can we improve on leadership? I want to give you an example of two hoteliers. So I visited this hotel and the general manager says, I've put a 5% service charge on rooms. And this 5% service charge, I make sure gets distributed to, back of the house, non-F&B, rooms division, housekeeping and other employees, because they don't get tips otherwise. So I said, well, okay. And then I'm talking to another hotelier, and he says, Wallace, I've abolished service charge. I've abolished tips totally. Our policy is no tips. If you're happy with our services, when you're checking out, you can leave some gratuities. And that gets distributed to everybody in the hotel. That gets distributed to everyone in the hotel. 2 different policies, right? Now, which one is more effective? We'll come to that. I was talking to you about a little bit earlier, I was talking to you about leaders who delegate. Now, you can delegate tasks, you can delegate responsibility, but you can never delegate accountability. Leaders cannot delegate accountability. That accountability has to be with themselves. I cannot say, oh, well, I gave this to Mr. X to do. He screwed it up. It's not my fault, right? As a leader, you have to take accountability or whatever happens. Employee engagement. Without employee engagement, you can never have a strong manpower. You can never have strong team. But what is employee engagement? Anybody here has not heard the term employee engagement? Everybody's heard the term employee engagement? Okay, let me see. How many people have heard this term employee engagement? Everybody has heard the term employee engagement, and we all know that in the hotel business, employee engagement is absolutely critical if you want to run a great hotel, if you want a great operation. Employee engagement is generally seen as where, as you mentioned, the employee is happy, he's satisfied, right? And a lot of companies focus on how to make the employees happier. So, non-hotels, but I've come across companies that will give them, a better recreation room, they'll give them a really nice toilet, and they'll give them a vending machine, and they'll give them a nice cafeteria, hoping that employee engagement is going to improve. But employee engagement is not the same, as you said, as employee satisfaction or even employee motivation. You can have a young employee who comes in, he's full of enthusiasm, he wants to do well, he's highly motivated, but can you call him engaged? You cannot. You cannot, because employee engagement is a measure at a point in time. And when I say that, what I mean is that an employee can come to work highly engaged, and his first briefing with you, he can be totally disengaged, depends on how you handle it. But an employee engagement is a measure of an employee's competence as well as his commitment and his passion to do a job. If he is not competent, no matter how committed or enthusiastic or motivated he is, he will not be able to do his job. So a leader's role is to ensure that the employee is first of all competent, because only when you are competent do you enjoy working. You have the confidence of working. So employee engagement is about competence, commitment, and passion, right? If you want to see what a true engagement is, you ask yourself, about yourself, do I go to work with a sense of purpose? Do I go to work every day with a sense of purpose? I want to achieve something. If you do that, you're engaged. If you can get your employees to do that, they are highly engaged. And that sense of purpose is not only about themselves, it's about the teams. Coming back to the example that I used about service charges, 5% service charge, and no service charges at all. The difference is that when you levy a 5% service charge, your employees are guaranteed a certain amount of tips or gratuities. They are guaranteed it. But if, like the other hotel, you levy no service charge, you accept no tips, and you tell the client, if you're happy, please leave it at the time of checkout, and if you want to recognize somebody, kindly fill up this form and mention this person's name. What that means for employees is that if they do not perform Not only they, but everybody else will not be getting the tips from this person, will not be getting the service charge from this person, right? So that is building accountability amongst the whole team. It's not about F&B service who's serving wine to a guest and he's very thrilled because he's got the attention. It's also whether the housekeeping chambermaid is saying hello to the guest in the corridor and how she's saying hello, right? So employees are watching each other. If you screw it up, all of us are going to be impacted. Don't screw it up. We are a team. We've got to make this person feel special, right? Whereas the other scenario, I'm guaranteed 5%. I'm guaranteed 5%. What is the incentive? This is a different approach. It's a leadership approach. It's a leadership decision. And I can tell you, when I stayed at the hotel which didn't levy service charge, when I was checking out, habitually, you look at your bill, and when you think tips, you think 10%. So instead of just paying 10% on F&B, I was actually very happily paying 10% on the entire bill. There was that much more money, not only from me, I'm sure from every guest, to go around, right? This hotel, the resort hotel, when I was checking out, they had 15 people standing on the steps, waving goodbye to my family, to say, please come back. Highly engaged, highly engaged. Empowerment, I spoke about empowerment. So I went to the same hotel and to another hotel, actually, same chain. And my daughters were in one room. We came back one day and my daughter comes running to me and she says, Daddy, look what was in my room. There's a letter. It says, Dear Michelle, we noticed that your lens cleaning solution was almost finished, so we took the liberty to get you one with our compliments. Signed, housekeeping supervisor. Human factor, that's the human factor, that's the human engagement. She was thrilled. Was it expectations? Of course not. It was beyond expectations, right? So employee engagement, and that is, again, I talked about processes, that is empowerment of processes. I want to just very quickly again touch about the culture. When I was front office manager, I had a general manager and a vice president. So I had a lot of pressure. Every evening the general manager would tell me, Wallace, I don't want you to bounce a single guest. Now remember, in those days there were no computers, right? And there were no credit cards. So there were no advance payments on bookings, etc., right? And we couldn't monitor flight details and, stuff like that. So last flights come in at 10, 11 o'clock. Our last guests check in about midnight. We always booked a little bit over. We knew there'd be some no-shows, and we hoped for the best. So general manager says, Wallace, I do not want a single guest bounced to another hotel. It's about customer service. Yes, sir. And the vice president would come after some time. How are we doing today, Wallace? I said, sir, we are full. I do not want a single room empty. It's all about the business. Yes, sir. Different cultures, same hotel, different leaders. Very interesting for me. I just want to say that the human factor is absolutely critical. And before I end, the sophistication with which your operation runs, the sophistication with which your employees behave is directly dependent upon you. You are the manufacturers of success. You start the human factor chain. Thank you. Any questions?
Taking care of this very important factor, and also, are they doing something to promote the leadership quotient in this among their leaders?
Right. Thank you. That's a very, very important and very pertinent question, especially in the given environment. Now, what I've noticed, and I can tell you what my experience has shown me, is that, number one, the hotel industry is not getting good people. It's a little difficult to attract people like it used to be a couple of decades ago. Today, young people have a lot of options. The hotel industry has to do something about coming to par with lifestyle or quality of life, wages, etc. And I think some hotels are moving, for example, from a 6-day week to with 1 off a week to maybe 6 offs in a month. So every alternate week they get giving an off because they realize that human beings are changing, our needs are changing. The other important factor is that the customer is changing. Decades ago, the customer didn't really know much. He hadn't traveled. He hadn't got that experience. Today, our customers are very knowledgeable, very discerning, very demanding, right? So the challenge in hotels to provide that outstanding service continuously is a growing challenge and a growing gap, I must tell you. Is the hotel industry doing enough? Some companies are. Some companies are focusing very strongly on employee development. They are focusing very strongly on training. They're focusing very strongly on their brand and on giving exceptional service because they know, they understand that we can have the most magnificent property, but it will not be classified luxury unless our teams are able to provide the level of service that we want them to provide. So they are investing. One big mistake that hotel chains are making are they're focusing on career development. Now, career development, for some reason, seems to be a preferred option to retain employees, right? So you tell an employee, you work with us so many years, you get promoted, you get an increment, continue for another few years, you become a supervisor or a manager, etc., etc. To my mind, that is a big mistake. Career development is not the right option to go. What is important, what is more important, is employee development. You focus on the employee, you focus on his strengths. So what I would say is it starts from the hiring process. Make sure you're hiring people who have the right talent for hospitality, not just the experience. Make sure you're hiring a person who would love customer interface to be in front office. Make sure you're hiring a lady who loves, discipline, decorum, tidiness. She has that passion for everything being absolutely spick and span. Cleanliness is a passion for her. Hire that lady for housekeeping, right? And then build on that talent. Build on their strengths, because only then will they have the competence, the immense competence, which will give them employee engagement, which will engage them, because they have confidence. So to answer your questions, not enough is being done. There is a huge opportunity, and that is why I wanted to talk about this subject, the human factor. When you take somebody in the IT industry, he comes pretty much well qualified, right? So you notice immediately whether he has the right qualification, he has the right aptitude, and he has the ability to deliver. And you take a call on a day-to-day basis. It's very transactional. But in the hospitality, in the hotel business, that's not the case. Because you can get somebody who's absolutely inexperienced, but has the talent for the hospitality business, has the enthusiasm to serve. He takes pleasure in serving people, right? But you have to groom him. You have to give him time. You have to support him, right? If you don't do that, and if you don't show him over a period of time how he's progressing, right, and you don't encourage him to progress even further, you are not going to get that level of sophistication that a hotelier must have. So to answer your question, the appraisal system is very, very important, but again, I must tell you, it's not very effective the way a lot of companies conduct the appraisal system. It's not very effective because they do not give clear job goals. They do not clearly identify responsibilities. It's a little vague, right? You've heard of SMART goals. They have to be specific, they have to be measurable, they have to be time-bound, they have to be applicable, aggressive, right? They do not give, clear expectations. They do not do half-yearly checks or even quarterly checks. right? But if you have an appraisal system where the manager says, this is what I expect from you, right? I'm going to be monitoring your performance under these parameters. Do you agree? The first thing about an appraisal system is that the employee must agree to the expectations you have of him. What do you need from me? What inputs do you need from me? How can I help you achieve these goals? And then you monitor him very frequently initially. When you see he's performing less frequently, then you start to delegate to him. Then you start to depend upon him. Show him he's improving. Show him his value to the organization is increasing. You will get sophistication. You will get employee engagement, because when he's fully matured, you can ask him to make sure that he trains fresh trainees. So the appraisal system in hotels is very important.